Today I look at Infinio. Here's my cluster of 3 SuperServers, and I have to give 2 back that were on loan in just a few short hours. So I'm squeezing in one more test with my home lab rig here, and that is you've got multiple types of storage. The focus now will be on iSCSI from Synology. So iSCSI I have set up in Synology with a actually modestly priced unit. So let me show you what I'm talking about. The idea here is this lower tier of storage we're going to accelerate today with Infino, kind of simulating what you would do at work. So we're just kicking the tires on something that could give a considerable speed boost to a lower tier of storage in my case. So we've got these various pieces of storage in the server you saw pictured in the center, and this is our focus today right there, iSCSI. Now setting it up, well, I basically nuked all partitions, said, hey, take the 2 drives and RAID them together for speed. Of course, you'd want backups. And then the other gotcha was right here on this page, click Edit, go to Advanced, and you definitely want to turn on Allow Multiple Sessions from 1 or more iSCSI initiators. Then I was able to attach the storage to each of my 3 hosts. So let's have a look at storage. And there it is, an M.2 device, and there it is, iSCSI. And of course, all 3 systems have that attachment. So what that means is one of the data stores that's available to everybody is the iSCSI, courtesy of Synology. Now, how about some VMs? All right, so we're going to want a VM running. And I've run this benchmark and used it several times. I know the speed of my iSCSI array, and you're about to see what that is. Okay, there it is. Those are the speeds I get. And here's my physical setup. iSCSI LUN block level, it's called. The fastest that a Synology can go. The thing only costs about $300 with 2 3 terabyte drives in there. So it's a pretty low-end Synology as far as, grunt. Okay, let's get started with Infinio. So Infinio, what does it do and how does it work? Well, let's head on over to their website. The Infinio product I'm looking at today is Infinio Accelerator. And here you go. An iSCSI example is given right in their site. I'm using ESXi 6.0, update 1 today. So I requested access and was given 2 files to download, and here they are. There's a huge zip file with OVA stuff inside of it. Let's not worry about that. Let's just take the 2 files they asked me to download. I didn't extract or anything. I'm just going to run the Windows installer on this Windows 10 machine, and we'll see what happens. Now, to keep things simple for today, I'm actually in a home lab and not going to worry about DNS. I'm actually just hard coding IPs for this particular scenario. If you do have a lab where you've tweaked host files, well, don't use DHCP. Just stick with static IPs to keep it simple. Because this appliance we're going to install is a version of Linux. And if it doesn't know your other machines by hostname, well, you're going to run into trouble. Okay, so the Windows installer, not really installer, this Windows executable is fired up. We're ready to agree the end user license agreement. See what it looks like. Talks about the beta program. And now this video has captured all of that for you if you pause. All right, ready to begin. Okay, I'm going to put it on a lightly used host that has nothing else going on. Quick peek here, you'll see the only VM that's running is this iSCSI Synology, and that's running on a different host. vCenter is also a VM, and that's running over on host number 3. So we're on host number 1. There's nothing going on there. An eligible data store, well, that would be my vSAN or my Synology. My vSAN is not performing that amazingly fast, and it's not using qualified hardware. So I'm going to stick with Synology, and then the network, VM network, and hit next. Host name for the management console. So we're about to create a VM, and it wants a name. Make sure it's available, of course. It is. Now I'm cheating. I'm not giving it a name. I'm giving it IP instead. Let's see if it'll let me do that. And remember what I said about networking here. Keep it simple if possible. All right. Now it's probably going to complain and say, nah, you really need to give me a name. But let's see what happens. Nope. Now this is explained right there. All right. Kind of telemetry data. Ready to deploy the management console. This is a pretty lowly laptop running Windows 10 you're looking at here. It does have an SSD on board, and it is gigabit attached. So we should be able to run this and have a look at the Ethernet and see what it's doing over here. And the answer is not much. It's having no trouble keeping up with the minimal Ethernet traffic going on. It's a little faster now. So we are speed bound by the write speed of my, you guessed it, Synology NAS. It's got nothing to do with the gigabit speed and nothing to do with the read speed of my local SSD. It's the write speed that's making this take a few minutes to shove over the wire. Okay, that worked. It only took a minute and 45 seconds for the OVF to actually be deployed. Let's see what else happened here in the event log. Okay, very simple. We've created a VM. And the VM is based on Ubuntu Linux 64-bit. And what does it look like, and would you mess with it? Well, that's not the point here. You're supposed to stick with the web browser. But if you're curious and want to see what the local UI looks like, there it is. All right, let's stick with the program here and continue with the wizard. You are done. You're labeled to log in. And it's logging me in by IP, which is of course going to work with some usual Chrome certificate warnings. All right, super simple interface. There's one device or one data store. It's ready to accelerate for me. Let's click on that. All right, gives me a little overview. One accelerator required per host. Little video if I want to watch about how this is going to work. Requirements, no problems there. I have tons of memory. 64 gig available on each host. And then finally, if I wanted to turn off some hosts, I could do that, but I'm going to let it run on all 3 hosts. So let's go back to a simple default accelerate. Here we go. Accelerate. Validate. Three hosts have met the recommended requirements. Oh, nice little UI here, showing clearly I've met what it wants. So we started at 9 minutes after the hour. Make some note of that. I do want to show host status because I like to see what's happening. Now we can peel off and make this much smaller. This window is done, but I'm curious if something happens later. Let me just minimize that for now. And then finally, let's open up the vSphere web client and just shove that off to the right. All right, so it's doing some stuff, right? You can see it's doing networking things right now. So clearly things are happening. Okay, so there you go with deploying the template, powering it on, and then a whole bunch of networking steps. Now, important to point out some tips that were given to me by Infino installation guide information. DRS and HA, it talks about those in the tips. The one that's relevant here is this one, ESXi host, power management to high performance. I did actually notice versus the default of balanced, that actually zipped up my ATO disk bench a bit. Now on iSCSI, it didn't matter much. It's limited by the low Synology, but when I was doing some NVMe or M2 testing, yeah, I could actually see some difference depending upon how you had the hardware power management set. And then finally make sure there's no third-party stuff used. This is a fresh lab with nothing else. So while we're in this little lull here, let me just go ahead and point to the host. IP address 1, for instance. Go to Settings. Go to the Hardware section under Power Management, and there you'll see Active Policy High, change from the default of Balanced. Okay, I'll also mention I was emailed some guides here, how to deploy accelerator operations, and something else. So 3 PDFs to read, as well as those tips I mentioned there about high performance. Here's information about the setup that we're in the middle of doing. Basically a bunch of screenshots of what we've seen. Okay, the second PDF. About operations, very detailed. And then finally, third PDF, requirements, just to see if you have what it takes to run this. All right, so a whole lot has happened. If we look carefully on the right screen, we'll see port groups and a lot of extra OVFs. So the first OVF that we said, hey, give it a name, 192.168, it ignored everything appending after the 192 and just gave it a name of 192. Kind of an odd host name I picked, huh? That's okay. This lab's getting all broken down and completely wiped in just a matter of hours. The results are what matters here in getting it installed. The accelerators are also now deployed. Here, why am I being cramped here? Let me just go ahead and say close, because there's nothing else to see here. And over here, it looks like oh, sorry, these are my remote control sessions. Absolutely nothing to do with Infinio. Back to this installer, that's still just hanging out like this. We can close that, we're done. We can maximize this. And it's saying there's no workload and there's nothing to look at quite yet. So that took, well, 8 minutes or so from when we kicked off that last question and answered. But we really started the video, was it 5 after the hour, something like that. So obviously it doesn't take very long to install this. How about manage caches? Okay, we can see a little bit. And then settings. A little bit more. I'm in eval mode. And then cleanup is right there. So pretty simple UI. We're going to need to leave it running for a little bit. Let's go back to this, but full screen it. And naturally, the first thing I'll want to do is get comparative performance speed. So that remote control session needs to come back up again. So iSCSI Synology, launch remote control. And I need to run a TTO dispense. Primarily the reads are what I might see a difference in here. Okay, I'm going to have to dig up an archive of that screenshot or the speeds I was getting before. But here we are on iSCSI storage, as you can see right here. If I open that up, there you go. This VM is clearly running there. And now let's see what kind of speed we get. I'm going to speed up time a bit here and zoom to the end. And I'm also going to look up a before picture so we can compare. Okay, the speed up is pretty pronounced, especially right where we need it, the 4 size. But here the boost is quite large too. So I need to get you the before result just a sec. And there it is. Now we could turn the cache on and off at will anyway. But here's how iSCSI looked before. Let's see if I can get that showing in a way that doesn't look so sloppy. Okay, here we go. So here's before. And here's after. All right, there's the raw numbers. Now at 1, for some reason, read looks a little lower. But here's where it really counts at 4, where you'd really feel the speed difference. Now, booting a VM on there would be a good idea right now. Right? How about booting this VM? Now, this VM should not have its network attached. It's been running all night, so it didn't have any Windows updates or anything going, but I'm going to go ahead and reboot it in front of you. We'll get a sense of how long it takes to reboot a VM off of iSCSI. So when I see the BIOS screen, that's when I start the clock. And actually, there's no second hand on my clock on Windows 10 here. Okay, well, we'll just have to go by the stopwatch here. Okay, it's powered on now. I've got auto login set, so we should get right to the Windows 10 desktop inside this VM. And I'll also point out this is 1 gig, not 10 gig iSCSI connectivity. Almost there, almost there. A little slow on the button there, but about 42 seconds. All right, so 42-second boot. Now, the horsing around or tinkering continues. How about we get Infinio's UI? Situated next to the remote session. And just try a few more simple tests. There's no networking here. And we just did a reboot. Let's just see how long the second reboot takes. So our distributed cache size is 24 gig. Little down arrow, it says the 3 accelerators are running just fine. And the data store that's accelerated is right here. And this, we're starting to get some statistics because I'm starting to actually use the iSCSI at this point. So you remember the before and after I mentioned. Well, okay, the screenshot was from a little while ago as far as the before. We can get the baseline results very easily by simply disabling acceleration. So it looks like that UI does not like to run anything less than a certain number of pixels. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to want to have enough room to show you side-by-side benchmark results. So I'm going to run ATDO dispatch, and I didn't hit the stop on the stopwatch, but yeah, it was around 40, low 40s for the reboot. So it's consistent results for the reboot. So I'm going to run Windows Disk Benchmark, ATTO. I'm going to have 2 copies of it going. And I'm going to just make sure that, well, we have no networking, so we don't have Windows Update or anything going on in the background to mess up this informal test. Okay, there we have that result. Now, you know, I'm going to, looks like it auto-refreshed, by the way, but there you go, some results. Well, maybe it didn't auto-refresh. You can see some spikes. But I'm about to disable it safely. And that was it. All right, so now I'm ready to run this a second time. All right, so it's finishing up. This is just baby steps on getting an idea of the performance. You'd want to do things like, I don't know, open up a large Excel spreadsheet multiple times, or install a database, whatever you might do in production to really get a better sense of your speed up. But here at 4, where things really count, the read went from 13 to 78, so about a 6x speed boost right there. Let's wrap up this short, quick look, where again, I'm strongly encourage you to take a deeper dive, maybe use iometer or iometer, and other tools, including what you actually do with this workload in your environment. Let's check out another reboot. Now that caching is off, to get a sense of 42 seconds with Infinio acceleration going becomes something presumably longer without Infinio running. 53 seconds. So yeah, a speed boost. Now the Synology itself, by the way, has a little bit of monitoring you can do from right in there. It looks like I didn't leave any of those widgets on. There we go. Synology is not very busy right now. That was a little bit tricky in that you're trusting my speed there. So let me get an online counter. Hang on a second, with a second. Okay, one more test. This time I can actually use a counter, so that's cool. Stopwatch. So about 50 seconds. Now, I can go ahead and pause this VM now, close my stopwatch, and say that now that I'm wrapping up and basically getting rid of all this 2 of the 3 cluster nodes, I want to know how to clean up, and does it do it cleanly? So you watching this video might also be interested. Does it cleanly remove the accelerators? And that'll be a good way to wrap this quick look video. So I'm going to size that to the right side of the screen again. We're going to see a whole bunch of tasks happen as presumably these things go away. Now those were booted before, so let's just make it a little more challenging. Let's turn on acceleration, which didn't take very long from what I recall. And you'll see it's probably going to be doing some stuff. Close, hit refresh. Actually, it just refreshed. There we go. Those are powered on. And acceleration is now back in store, or back in action. But if we go to settings and say we want to remove all accelerators, well, it's obviously going to need to stop those and then nuke them. So let's just watch it do its thing, including this VM, the Ubuntu Linux. First, it's going to disable acceleration, and then it's going to remove the accelerators. You can resume acceleration at any time. All right, so all this is doing is removing the 3 accelerators. As far as manually deleting the 4 VMs involved, I think that's going to be up to me, but hardly a big deal. Does not appear to be any kind of vib install in ESXi hosts. It's just VMs doing their thing. I'll want to look into it or do more research before I conclude that, but that's by appearance and by some discussions I had after a presentation I had by the CTO, Scott Davis. I believe that's the case, that it's simply a set of 4 VMs in my case. 1 for each of my 3 hosts, and then this management IP that you'll see has highlighted here over on the right, the Ubuntu Linux VM. I'm going to hit refresh for a more real-time-ish look at what might be going on. Okay, it's deleted VMs, it's cleaning up networking now. Something called an Infinio P2P0 network it had created. So it does appear that it's truly cleaning up after itself, not just removing the accelerators, but I think it might remove the network pieces, and by the looks of it, it sure is. Remove virtual switch, for instance. Okay, unloading the accelerated driver requires a host reboot. Okay, so it's telling us it's okay to power this down. I'm doing it forcibly because I'm about to nuke it anyway. If I have a look here over at networking, it's cleaned. There was a vib, so it's admitting that there was a driver installed, and to get rid of it, we're going to need the host rebooted. So Ubuntu's now gone, and other than rebooting my hosts, I'm done. And it was only consuming 100 meg of memory for the driver. So that's it. If I click close, presumably, well, this is going to lock up because that IP is no longer there. So I can close the browser. So that ends my look at Infinio. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and thank you for visiting tinkertry.com. Now, if you want to really be convinced that this thing cleaned up after itself and didn't have troubles rebooting, that might be a reason you're watching this video. I'm going to go ahead and be thorough and reboot the hosts. Now they're set to auto start. Let's see. Host number 1 and 2 don't have any important workload going on at all. Host number 3 does. It's got vCenter on there, so I could take a quick look at VM startup shutdown and just see vCenter set to auto start. All right, so that's good. So all 3 hosts are rebooting. How would you know it? Well, I can actually show you. Okay, naturally it takes a little while to reboot and get your VCSA appliance going again, but there was no problem at all during boot. Now the vSAN had to come up, and that's a little crazy to be booting all 3 hosts, so my vSAN's probably angry at me. But iSCSI and Infino, as far as I can tell, it's highly likely everything is gone. It told me it was uninstalling any driver, which was only 100 meg footprint. Not a problem on systems that can go all the way up to 128 gig in my home lab here. And really, I'm just looking for any kind of, weird warning or nasty error here, which is unlikely to be the case. So my cluster is fine, and I can't see any reason why I can't just go ahead and power my VM up. That is not accelerated, but obviously my Synology iSCSI should be just fine. And there you have it. Back to using my home lab. Everything fully functional. So, that concludes my look at Infinio Accelerator on ESXi 6.0 Update 1. Hopefully you found this video helpful. Thank you for watching and for visiting tinkertry.com.